Welcome to DeProgram. I'm Michelle Witte. I am here with John Kiriakou and Ted Rall. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Well, we had plans to talk about some other things. I wanted to talk about this Wall Street Journal article about how more and more rich people are like the spindly little stick that is propping up the entire US economy, and like the indomitable US consumer is actually five guys in boat shoes. But then Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and Volodymyr Zelensky put on a show in the Oval Office that
more
it is
more
true.
of a cage match.
I mean, even if you are not a sort of, Slavo-Ukraini freak online, it was hard to watch. I also was just looking at a little clip that purports to show Zelensky muttering some epithet at J.D. Vance under his breath in Russian or Ukrainian, which is pretty funny. So we are going to talk about that immediately. We are also, a little later in the show, going to talk to Canadian author Yves Engler, who was arrested earlier this month and held in jail for 5 days.
Crazy.
For on charges of harassment and indecent communication, but I had to look around for anything that seemed like that and couldn't find it. It is just that he has been responding negatively to social media posts by a very pro-Zionist media personality who I had never heard of in my life. So we will talk about why he was actually in custody for 5 days and why they let him go and what is coming next. And then, if we have some time, did want to talk about Donald Trump signing an order. He's supposed to sign it today to make English the national language of the United States. The first one we'll have had in 250 years for no real reason. And
I have to stop studying, Bangla.
Yes, finally. Well, you'll be free to speak English in the streets again, Ted.
Finally, about time.
And we've also got Jake Tapper getting pretty roasted on social media for announcing that he's got a new book coming out about the cover-up of Joe Biden's mental decline.
Oh, my God.
Yes, people saying, "This you, Jake?" over and over and over in his replies, which are pretty funny. I will say, I did some research into this too, as much as I had time for. And yeah, Jake Tapper was bad, but he was really far from the worst. I think the worst on this were just sort of the New York Times across the post, CNN across the board. CNN was pretty bad, but Jake Tapper not the worst among them. But we'll get to that in a minute, because we had the president of the United States, the vice president of the United States, and the president of Ukraine. Zelensky had flown over here. They're going to have a nice little chat. He's going to sign this agreement about giving the United States access to Ukraine's whatever like rare earth minerals they supposedly have. I don't know where they are. I don't know that Ukraine actually has access to them right now. I don't know that they're not in Russian-controlled territories.
They do, actually. There are, they do.
But basically an agreement to give the United States quite a lot of access to subsoil resources in Ukraine, as if we don't have access to their economy up and down at this point. But it does seem like what happened in the Oval Office about an hour or so ago has scuttled that. I don't even know where to start. It was a long sort of televised sit down that seemed to go fine at first.
Mm-hmm.
They're sort of chatting about how, I don't know, they're going to sign this deal. It's going to be great. Then reporters in the audience started asking questions about ceasefire, about security guarantees, and it all went very off the rails with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance haranguing Zelensky for not being thankful enough.
Mm-hmm.
J.D. Vance said, "Have you said thank you even once?" and Trump repeating, you have to be thankful. You don't hold the cards in this. And I mean, it's enough to make you, it almost makes you feel bad for Volodymyr Zelensky. I mean, I suppose that to some degree I do as a person, but
he looked like a deer in the headlights. Like he never saw this coming.
Yeah.
They ganged up on him and he was trying to be respectful and just, he couldn't think quickly enough to respond.
It was planned.
Absolutely.
It looked spontaneous, or it was meant to look spontaneous. The New York Times in their live feed said this was organic. I couldn't disagree more. From the body language of Trump, who refused to meet Zelensky's eyes, he obviously, which is something people do when they're, they know that they're not playing it straight. They're not really angry. They're playing a part. To the fact that, basically Vance's comment, which launched all this about, you're not being grateful enough. It wasn't really an organic response to what Zelensky was talking about. Zelensky was giving a little, history of the conflict dating back to 2014, back to Maidan and the beginning of the civil conflict in the Donbass. And then suddenly, Vance is on him about that and, about this thank you thing. He doesn't address it. And also at the end of the exchange, I assume you guys saw this, Vance reaches over and taps Trump on the shoulder. Like, in other words, like, don't worry, it'll be okay.
I saw that.
Why would you do that? The only reason it's, if Trump was just genuinely angry, I don't think he would have done that. I think this was one of those things they worked out in advance. There's been reporting for the last week or so that Trump wants Zelensky out. I think this was like, we're going to bring him in. We're going to kneecap him. We're going to humiliate him on international television. And we're going to destroy the one reason he has to be president of Ukraine, which is that we support the Ukraine. He can get the money and the arms from us. I think that's what this was all about.
I honestly thought Trump was maybe going to lay a hand on Zelensky at one point.
He did.
Where he's like coming back and jabbing. Did he actually? I didn't, because I'm listening and watching.
He did. He pulled a Sean Hannity kind of thing, like, one of these things.
I mean, Zelensky is sitting up there and having, again, as you say, sort of giving this little history lesson, but having to not say, you're accusing me of not being thankful. Zelensky was elected to make peace with Russia. Right? That's what he was. He won a huge electoral victory. He had campaigned on, we're going to solve this problem. It's fine. And, it was the United States who came and leaned on him and said, no, let's switch that up a little bit. Right. So he's sitting there having to give this sort of history lesson without saying, yeah, well, there was that coup that you guys supported really powerfully in 2014. There was my election where I campaigned on behaving one way and then sort of completely changed my tune after I got into power. There was this 2022 negotiation process that was underway shortly after Russia's invasion in Istanbul. That I can't tell you where that would have gone. But I can tell you that there has been plenty of reporting that, Boris Johnson, the UK prime minister at the time, went there with the blessing, and perhaps at the behest of the United States, to ensure that a peace deal wasn't agreed to. Right. And so as much as I think, Zelensky has sold out as much as anybody in this story, to sit there with the hundreds of thousands of losses in Ukraine and be told that you're not thankful enough, when you've basically undertaken this proxy war for the United States, like, that is upsetting, right? That's very upsetting.
Was for
regardless
U.S.
of who the
domestic.
players are.
That's for U.S. That part's for U.S. domestic consumption.
Of course,
agreed.
That's for MAGA world. Like, why are we still, to try to? I mean, with 88% of Americans opposed to Russia, according to the latest polls, it's going to take some. It's a heavy lift to go to the American public and say, after all this, we're going to cut Ukraine loose. So that's what Trump is trying to. He's trying to sell, like, these are ingrate. This is ingrate. I was reminded of sort of the conflicted relationship between FDR and Charles de Gaulle, the leader of the Free French during World War II. He was often portrayed by the Roosevelt administration as an ingrate for American assistance, that he was not humble enough, that he didn't understand that France had lost and needed to eat crow and just understand it. And and de Gaulle was a very proud nationalist and refused to have it. And they were always butting heads to the point where when the Allies landed at Normandy in 1944, they had orders not to allow de Gaulle to assume power. And they tried to prevent that. And it was Eisenhower, as the head of the Allied command, who sort of stepped in and sabotaged FDR's policy against de Gaulle to allow the Free French to seize power, like one town at a time. I mean, but it reminded me. I mean, Zelensky's no Charles de Gaulle, but still, the parallels were striking.
Yeah. If you were Joe Biden, you could say, "I've met Charles de Gaulle."
You're no Charles de Gaulle.
No Charles de Gaulle. I was actually wondering at what point, this is, I'm sure, totally naive of me, but I was watching Zelenskyy sitting there, and wondering, at what point do you say, hey man, this was all you're doing, you know what I mean? Or this was, say, 75% you're doing.
Say that.
I mean, he does repeatedly say, of course, we're fighting this war for you. First Kiev, next, Berlin, Paris, whatever, which nobody believes.
Ohio.
Nobody believes. Trump did actually have it's comic, and I will say a little bit chilling to see a president act like this. One of the reporters, I assume a Ukrainian reporter, asked, but what if Russia violates the ceasefire agreement? He's like, what if a bomb falls on your head right now? I don't know. I mean, it was cold.
Even though there was a lot of stage acting, as I think, on both parts, right? I mean, Zelenskyy couldn't really say what you suggested because, again, that wouldn't fly at all, right? I mean, that would, the minds would explode all over the world if he said something like that. But I thought it was very, Slavoj Zizek, the Slovenian philosopher, he's a Lacanian, and he's obsessed with Lacan's search for the real, which is so absent in our society and particularly in our politics, where, for example, you have a president for the last 4 years who was senile, clearly, but we're all supposed to pretend like he's not. So here was a moment that felt almost real. Like this is like actual conflict between world leaders who are always smiling and shaking hands. We never see anything like this. And I gotta say, it was awesome. I want to see more of it. I mean, it was real, sort of.
Except it's bullshit. I mean, it's real in that you feel like it, but like, maybe Donald Trump believes this. I don't think JD Vance believes this. I don't know who believes like Zelenskyy, snookered the United States into giving them hundreds of billions of dollars, which is, it's sort of like it's the opposite side of the coin, when Ukraine is supposedly responsible for all this stuff that we know the United States is responsible for, like blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline or whatever. I mean, I say no because that's where the evidence points, right? But like the other side of the coin of, the U.S. obscuring its role behind all of this is it's made it very easy for someone like Trump to come in and say, guess you shouldn't have blown up that pipeline.
Well, what this was the latest example of? I just finished a cartoon for next week about this, and it's and the caption is, at the support group for jilted U.S. allies, right? And there's like Noriega and Saddam and even Osama. They're all hanging out there because, I mean, this is what we do, right? We use you up, and when we're done with you, we crumple you up like a snot rag and we chuck you to the wind.
Can I add something too? As soon as this story broke, I started switching back and forth between Fox, CNN, and MSNBC. And MSNBC and CNN immediately called in the usual cast of characters: Admiral Stavridis, former DNI, what's his name? The liar, what's his name?
Oh, yeah.
Clapper, Jim Clapper.
Oh, God, the worst.
Yeah. All the usual cast of characters. They were shocked to the point where they were having trouble responding. And listen, we all agree here that this was carefully staged by Trump. It was just too perfect. And of course, on Fox, they were just gloating over what a great presentation of American power and strength this was. Well, on the other networks, what they very quickly decided to focus on was how this weakens NATO, and it weakens the American commitment to NATO. It weakens the U.S. position in NATO. It makes us a weaker country. Now, they can't explain how they get to that conclusion, but it looks like, at least at this early stage, that's going to be the talking point.
I will say I'm not as convinced that it was staged as you are, but I'm not going to argue against it. I don't know. We'll see.
For
so
me,
when we find out, we'll
that
see which one of us was right.
You know what the tell is? The tell is the reaction does not meet the act, does not match the action. It's like when you see the cops beating a person prone on the street, and they're like, quit resisting, quit moving, and the person's like, I'm not moving. I'm not. Right?
Yeah.
This is like that.
Yeah. It just went out of my head. I will say, I think also, I may be reaching here because this is a favorite theme of ours, but when Donald Trump was talking about Russia, talking about Putin, right? Because Zelensky's like, Putin's a liar. He's not going to keep his word. He's going to break a ceasefire, whatever. Trump said, I forget if he said Russia and I or Putin and I, but he said, Putin. I went through a lot. Putin and I, we went through a lot together. We've been through a lot together. And he said, like, he referred to the Hunter Biden laptop bullshit. He clearly, it seems as though he feels that both he and Russia were wronged by Russiagate. It's another one of those unforeseen, you have to think, unforeseen consequences of this like years-long hoax, this sort of like weird obsession with which Democrats and a lot of the mainstream media, that like, here you go. You've now made Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin sort of co-victims of your antagonism, and he sees that he sees them as having both experienced.
And you've pushed Russia and China into each other's arms.
Yeah,
all of that stuff.
You did all of this stuff that I thought you didn't want to do. But again, like if this, I guess whether this was staged or not, part of the driving force here is that Donald Trump feels, and Ukraine was the subject of the first impeachment.
Not to feed into the Trump is Putin's bitch narrative, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if Putin, this is a response to, in part, to Putin's behind the scenes and in front of the camera statement that Zelensky's illegitimate and he wants to deal with someone else. And he doesn't, definitely Trump and Vance have decided the administration's decided they want Zelenskyy out. They want someone new to negotiate with.
I wonder, I had a point to your, John, your statement about how the mainstream is, oh my God, this is weakening NATO. They're always finding like examples of something that Trump has said very clearly. You know what I mean? Where he said very clearly, I'm not quite sure I see the point of NATO. Everybody else needs to step up more, et cetera, et cetera. That's probably what, it seems like NATO is going to be weakened by that. It's like everything is evidence for something that someone has said straightforwardly and very plainly in words.
Right.
But so if they don't want to deal with Zelenskyy, I don't know that you guys have any answer. Like, who do they want to deal with? Russia? Who does the U.S. want?
I don't know. Maybe they want Zelenskyy. I think they almost just want someone else. But knowing the Russians, they surely have someone specific in mind.
You also just think, why? Because clearly Zelenskyy was malleable before. You know what I mean? I guess now he's so entrenched, they think maybe he's not in a position to pivot.
Zelenskyy would literally be breaking his own law if he were to negotiate with Russia.
That's right.
I think,
But so will somebody else. So will the next guy.
Well, but it's different when it was your law. Yeah. You can have that law repealed when it's not the one you came up with. I think it's a branding thing. It's just like, honestly, they're almost doing Zelenskyy a favor by kicking him out. It's like, let him go, retire him, let him go off to Lake Como.
A farm.
And it's like, and then like bring someone else in to, for for the signing ceremony on the USS Missouri, right? Like, I think this is about stagecraft.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think that's
they're trying to pin it. I guess I can. Maybe you could make the argument. Maybe this will play out that they're trying to sort of make this personally the fault of Zelensky.
Yes.
And it was his fervent desire to keep the war going against all the best advice, et cetera, et cetera. There's a tiny grain of truth to that, I suppose. I mean, there has been like opposition within Ukraine. There are people who say like he has also put in place loyalists who, there was sort of cabinet reshuffles that seemed to benefit Zelensky personally rather than the Ukrainian army or Ukrainian
There's a lot
troops,
of opposition people on house arrest.
Yeah. But I mean, again, that will be unfair to suggest that this is Zelensky's baby, but they might make
but it's not allowed to. It can never be said out loud that the United States pushes other patsy countries into fighting stupid, unwinnable proxy wars.
Yeah.
How crazy is it, though, that when I'm sitting here watching this unfold on TV, I'm rooting for Donald Trump? I struggle with this, but if we're going to be supporters of peace or peace activists, and Trump is shouting at Zelensky that you're playing with World War III.
Yeah.
How crazy is it that I'm thinking that's exactly what he's doing?
It was
Trump
great.
Was right.
It was great. By the way, I don't know if you guys stuck around for the Q&A after the Thrilla in Manila or whatever kind of rhyming boxing thing we can have for DC, but it was the something in the Oval. Got to come up with that rhyme.
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
But it was but there was the one question where a reporter asked Trump, "Are you on Ukraine's side?" And he's like, "Well, of course that's a stupid question. Obviously,
yes,
we've been supporting Ukraine, but then." Are you on Russia's side? And he said, or are you in between? He said, I'm in between.
I'm a mediator.
I'm in between. I want peace. I'm on neither side. I'm in between. I want all the dying to stop. He kept emphasizing that. I mean, I thought it was, look, I mean, for all the faults, I mean, Trump's uncountable faults, it is amazing to have the leader of the free world be a person who repeatedly says that he hates people dying in wars. I have not heard a Democratic president talk about that.
Yeah.
Much less a Republican.
You know what my first reaction was, though? Because, of course, I came to this kind of in the middle of it, watched a bit, and then I had to go back and tried to watch from the beginning. My first reaction was, I wish you would talk to Netanyahu that way.
Yeah.
I'd love to see someone
fucking you can say that
spank
again.
the Israeli prime minister in the Oval Office.
That's
that
not
is somebody
allowed.
who actually needs it. You know what I mean? Like Zelensky's been a pawn from the beginning. Yeah. I mean, I guess we can dream. I don't think.
Yeah, in this analogy, he's a boss.
A boss?
Yeah, he's Mahmoud Abbas.
Oh, a boss. Oh, yes.
Who's 17 years into a 4-year sentence?
He's a null quantity.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess they are, I mean, according to White House reporters, right? They walked out of that. The Americans and the Ukrainians went to huddle with their various sides. There was a lunch planned that did not happen. And the Ukrainians, I guess, were told to leave.
Well, the
mineral agreement.
What CNN was reporting was that Trump and Vance went to one room, the Ukrainians went to the other room, and then Trump told an aide, get them the hell out of here. And so the car was summoned, Zelensky got in, and the Ukrainians drove away.
And issued a statement that Zelensky is not ready for peace, and he's welcome back when he's ready.
Yeah, when he's ready to make a deal.
Yeah,
I don't know how this goes. And again, it is nice to see. It's nice to see an American president saying, "I want to be, whatever. I want to be a mediator. I want the dying to stop." It's just that this has been a change. You know what I mean? 3 months ago, this was extremely different, and we were, with Ukraine to the last Ukrainian. Like again, I don't trust anyone in this administration as far as I can throw them. And I feel sorry for, I feel sorry for the Ukrainian people who are the biggest losers in all of this. Yeah. Just like, I really hope people in Taiwan are watching. You know what I mean? Yeah. I hope anyone who aspires to a leadership role in Taiwan has been watching this.
The
That's
Taiwanese are far more cynical about their American patrons. They've, my ex-in-laws were all Taiwanese, and they were, and I heard from, pro KMT and pro DPP people, and everybody kind of was like, well, the Americans just sell us, weapons that are a little bit out of date, and they view us as idiots and patsies, and we know they're not going to come and and defend us against the Chinese if the Chinese ever come across the strait. But on the other hand, what will we do without them? I think they have, their eyes are a little more open.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that's right.
I mean, I don't know. Any predictions for what happens next? Because, I mean, Zelensky came here apparently prepared to sign some kind of deal, which was being represented a little bit differently on both sides. This is a framework for future, discussions versus this is a deal. This is a deal that gives us all of Ukraine's mineral wealth. I think
everything, we're not going to see what's happening next. It's going to be internally in Kiev or Kyiv, depending on your point of view, right? It's going to be, it's over there. It's it's the internal politics of Ukraine. If he survives this, then I don't know what happens. But if he doesn't, then the new leader of Ukraine negotiates a deal with Trump, and we start from scratch.
I mean, maybe this gives him the excuse to resign. Because he said, Zelensky had said recently, I'll resign if it will help, bring an end to this or whatever. I mean, in the meantime, saying...
He resigns the hero.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. He's the Ukrainian nationalist who stood up to the Ruskies and then stood up to the Americans.
Yeah. Hard to see how you come out of a meeting like that looking like a hero. But maybe Trump and Vance know they're the heels. Also, he's played a heel before, right?
The thing is, he just crash landed the plane upside down in the snow. I mean, now it's the door hasn't opened yet. We don't know if anyone's alive. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. All right. I don't think that we have our next guest. I think we're waiting. Do you want to talk about this? Well, we've got Jake Tapper's new book, and we've got this, English is the official language of the United States business. I don't know.
Let's do Jake.
What's the book called? I've seen now I can't get out of my house, my head, the joking response.
Original
that it actually
Sin.
should be called, oh God. People are saying it should have been called If I Did It. Which is great. Yeah, Jake Tapper, y'all. Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson.
Yes, who I've never heard of.
No, they got a new book coming out that's going to talk about.
The subtitle is President Biden's Decline, its cover up, and his disastrous choice to run again.
Oh my God! I mean, this is If I Did It, right? I mean, I will say again, Jake Tapper. Probably CNN is not the worst offender when it came to completely denying what a lot of people could see, which is that Joe Biden was like not really with it all the time. But they were pretty bad. And people have very handily provided evidence over the last 4 years of Jake Tapper defending Joe Biden. He was defending Joe Biden on the Stephen Colbert Show in 2020. Then later that year, laughing with Jill Biden, who told him, you can't even say the word gaffe. Nope, not even allowed. He started chuckling about how he's not allowed to ask this was when they were running ahead of the 2020 election. I forget exactly the timing of it, but that, he's not even allowed to ask her a question about whether her extremely old husband is up to the job of running the country. He, Jake Tapper, that is, went in big that year with the Joe Biden has a stutter and you're all being ableist argument. He was having a discussion with Laura Trump that year, 2020, where he was pointing to some instance of her saying it was sort of painful to watch Joe Biden try to speak. And then he was like, well, you're just being mean and making fun of a man with a stutter, which is ridiculous. In 2023, in a conversation with author Franklin Foer, he said of Biden, he's sharp mentally. The question is physically. And then in 2024, he was grilling Dean Phillips, the Democrat who first came out and attempted to run against Joe Biden, grilling Dean Phillips about whether he damaged Biden for questioning his fitness for office. And when the Wall Street Journal came out with one of the first big mainstream reports on Biden's decline while in office, he was very critical of it. Saying it was mostly from Republicans and blah, blah, blah. This was a story, it was behind closed doors. Biden shows signs of slipping from June of 2024. So he was in it until the debate. Mm-hmm. When I guess we are supposed to believe that the scales fell from his eyes and he was able to see the truth, and that videos of Joe Biden sort of wandering away during a G7 meeting and not dancing to music on stage when everybody was dancing were not what the White House was calling cheap fakes and selectively edited, but merely representative examples of the president's behavior over his term of office.
I know Jake Tapper pretty well. He's a big friend of political cartoonists, and he's a very nice man, and I like him. And he's a neighbor of mine. And I really wish him all the best. And I hope he sells lots of books. I'm going to read the book.
Could he hear that through your walls?
That's it. Hi, Jake. Now, that said, in this situation, if, in terms of Biden's decline, and I'd argue that it goes back to 2017 or 2018. You were either, if you didn't see it, you're either you're stupid.
Yes.
And if you did see it and you didn't say anything, then you're a liar because you're a journalist and you're supposed to tell the truth. Yeah. And so which is it, right? I'll give Jake Tapper the credit he deserves. He's a smart man. He's not stupid. He saw it. Everybody saw it. All these reporters talk to each other. They have friends in the White House. They know people. They drink with and sleep with people who know Joe Biden and see him. I mean, it's like they all know. They all knew. They knew all along. And honestly, it was in plain sight to me. The only really fascinating part of the story is the fact that what this reveals is that most Americans never watch the news and never watch CNN, and they only paid attention to the election when the debate, the big show was on, when the Super Bowl of American political elections is on. They tuned in. They're like, holy crap, the president's out of it. But they all knew, and they cover. And I guess the question really is, should they have said anything? And I'm like,
yes,
yes.
You're a journalist.
Not to mention, it's like you talk about threats to democracy. Mm-hmm. I mean, these Democrats pulled off a coup. Mm-hmm. They installed a person who wasn't all there, and they had a cabal of unelected people running the show from behind the scenes. And that might be a great system, but that's not the American system that we all signed up for.
And I will say, and I want to let you weigh in on this too, John, before we bring in our guest, but it's not as though, Ted, they didn't even not say anything. They attacked the right-wing accounts who were saying things. Mm-hmm. I mean, sure, a bunch of these guys are trolls, or a bunch of these guys are, but sometimes what they are saying is correct. And if the evidence is there in front of your face, and again, Tapper, we say Tapper totally changed his tune after the debate. And he did sort of push for he then questioned over and over whether Biden should be running.
Too late by then.
Yes.
And now Donald Trump is president.
And I will say, it's his network, meanwhile, and I think the three of us agree, you shouldn't be judged by people you share a network with. Sure. But I will say, Abby Phillips also in 2024 is talking about how, Republicans are clogging the airways, filling the pipelines with selectively edited videos, which is just, most of those, listen, I tried to see the difference between some of these cheap fakes and the supposedly real videos, and I gave up because there wasn't a difference.
No.
I didn't find anything that was actually like manipulated.
Cheap fakes are themselves a fake. There's no such thing.
It's just, yeah. And so, the spin on that was always that it is a Republican talking point to question whether the president is fit. And that's worse than saying nothing. I don't know,
Look,
John.
I do want to hear from John. I just want a quick interjection. Look, here's my thing here. The Biden administration, the people who were pulling the strings, the Tony Blinkens of the world, all those people, they gambled. They decided, like, let's see if we can pull this off, not just for 4 years, but we didn't just get away with this for 4 years. We're going to re-up. We're going to let it roll. Okay, yeah. So you were at the casino. All right, now it's a call. You got to pay. You lost. Okay, so this is the thing. Jake Tapper and all these other guys, they lost. Mm-hmm. But now Jake's trying to grift the other side that he grifted the first time. And now they're all like that. They all want to walk away and not pay. There should be accountability.
I have to agree. And, Ted, like you, I like Jake Tapper. I know him, not as well as you do, but he actually drove to the prison where I was incarcerated and visited me. Wow. And interviewed me when he was still with ABC News just before he went to CNN. Good guy, very sweet guy.
Yeah.
But this idea that he's promoting in the book, I think, is just simply disingenuous. When we now know that in the very first week that Joe Biden was president, and he went up to the Hill to meet with House Democrats to talk about his legislative agenda, and couldn't because his brain could not process the information. And Nancy Pelosi says that she had to get up and give the president's legislative agenda speech. Wow. The first week that he was president. Jake Tapper knew that. Every journalist in Washington knew that. Capitol Hill leaks like a sieve. So for Jake to say that, we didn't know that, we were hopeful, it was physical, it wasn't mental. Come on, man. Mm-hmm. We were all watching the same events unfold. Better than that. And he's one of the best. He
could in the book do a mea culpa and just say, you know what? I'll come out of my foxhole. We all knew, I knew, I confess, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. He could. I'd respect that.
But then but that's just saying I was doing PR for the DNC for 4 years.
That's the problem, right?
Like, you can say you apologize, but then you should retire.
That's it. That is true.
I mean, that's disqualifying as a journalist. You know what I mean? Sure, for 4 years. And certainly, they reported that he didn't have a cabinet meeting for
the op-ed writers are the same. Yeah. Even the political cartoonists.
Yeah,
they're the same. They're all the same. They all did it.
Yeah, they did. Yep. And
it was inconvenient to them and it's like, not to mention also, they destroyed the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party's brand in recent years has been, we tell the truth. We're not Donald Trump. Donald Trump always lies. We're truth tellers. Where's the good luck with that now?
Yeah. Yeah. And here we are. Bring them all into the Oval Office. Let's have another showdown.
Oh yeah. Let Trump yell at him.
And televise it.
I mean, honestly, trust in media, hilariously, the idea that they keep looking for, where did all the trust go? Where did it all go wrong, guys? We could lay it out. All right. I don't want to keep our guest waiting because I'm very interested to hear what he has to say. So this is someone who we have spoken to before, previous iterations of this show, Canadian author and activist Yves Engler. And we've spoken to him in the past about sort of Canadian politics and U.S.-Canada relations. And we've spoken to him a lot in the past about things like censorship of pro-Palestinian voices online, talked about, analysis on how the war, the massacre in Gaza is playing out, sort of the politics of that, the international politics of that. We're talking to him now because Yves Engler just spent 5 days in jail.
Crazy.
He didn't have to, as I understand it, and I'm going to ask Yves to explain this to us in more detail, but he could have been processed and released on the same day that he was arrested, which was February 20th. But the government only wanted to release him, I think, on the condition that he not speak or write about his case. The case was, I believe he was accused of harassment and indecent communication for responding to the social media posts of a person who is described as a media personality. I've never heard of her. She seems to have nearly 500,000 Twitter followers. But this woman named Dahlia Kurtz, who is, seems to be sort of a professional Zionist and posts a lot of pro-Israel and anti-Palestinian stuff. So he's charged with harassing her, accused of harassing her, accused of indecent communication, which I had to look up, which seems to encompass communication that is deemed sexually suggestive, obscene, or threatening. And this is, again, supposedly for responses to her Twitter posts. And Yves, I went and had a look. I'm not going to pretend this is some kind of scientific review, right? But I was like, well, let's go see what kind of stuff Yves has been saying in response to this media personality. And I found 2 responses to her tweets in February, 3 responses to tweets of hers in January, 4 in December, a huge month, 3 in November, 0 in October, 1 in September, 1 in July. Then I stopped. It didn't seem like harassment, and it was mostly, along the lines of, this is wrong, your opinions are bad. So is that really enough to get you accused of a crime and thrown into jail in Canada these days? Yves, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. I was saying, is that tell us what happened.
I got a phone call from a Montreal police investigator Tuesday, so I guess 10 days ago now, and they said
Which city is this in? I'm sorry.
I'm in Montreal. So
Okay.
I'm in Montreal. And they said, the Montreal police said that they were going to charge me for harassing Dahlia Kurtz, and they wanted me to come down to the police station the next day. And obviously immediately I kind of argued against the investigator, which was probably an error. You're probably best off just staying quiet. But I then got my a friend lawyer, to call to find out what exactly. At the time, she told me I'd come down to the station and it would take 15 minutes. They would charge me. Presumably they would get my fingerprints and they would let me go. She didn't tell me much about the conditions that they were going to try to impose, but when my lawyer called, they told him there was this condition I couldn't mention her name, which effectively means I couldn't talk about the case against me. And so my lawyer immediately I immediately was, no, I'm not doing that. And he was no. And so what I did then was I wrote about it. I wrote a story, posted on my website, posted it on social media. It went quite viral. Also, an action alert, an email letter campaign was set up to the police investigator. By the next morning, more than 2,000 people had emailed the police investigator. And the Montreal police responded by then saying I was harassing the Montreal police, specifically the investigator. And they brought in 4 new charges, all kind of centered around harassment of a police officer. And then they said I'd have to come in the next day. And then at this point, they were continuing with this condition of effectively not being allowed to talk about the case. And they told me that they would, at that point, they said they would probably I'd spend 24 hours in jail. And yeah, so we did a little rally. Then I of course wrote about that right away as well. So the follow-up story, and then there was a follow-up action alert to the mayor and to the chief of police, and there was a little rally, and about 30 people accompanied me the next morning to jail. And the police, the detention center, and the police could have released. I was willing to accept conditions that said I had no communication with either of the 2 people that they were accusing me of harassing. I have never emailed, direct messaged Dahlia Kurtz. I've never met her. I've never phoned her. I've never threatened her. I don't even follow her on X, right? Her stuff just appears in my feed. The police investigator told me that she doesn't even live in Montreal. She actually lives in Toronto. So
I'm glad you brought that up. Are these local, provincial, or federal, Canadian federal charges?
They're provincial, yeah. So
Okay.
it's from the Montreal police.
So it's the province of Quebec.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I mean, I have a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old. Like the idea that I'm like a threat to this, like, and again, she's a social media. She used to, I think she might still have a bit, but she used to have some sort of like corporate media radio gig. She's very prominent. Where I became aware of her was just over the past year on social media. And she's a really prominent, kind of like hardline Zionist. And I should make this clear. She's not like a, mainstream right Zionist. She's like 2 months ago, she posts this group of 6 or 7 neo-Nazis who organized this thing in Hamilton where they said mass deportations now, right? Like just like deport all the non-whites kind of idea, right? So she's pushing into some fairly hardline kind of territory, and the notion that she's like the victim and she in this kind of context is just kind of, I don't deny at all that I've incredibly, I'm very hard line in my politics on X. I'm with her and many others very snarky in my responses, but that's it. I mean, that's all I'm doing here. Like, it's just snark and like hardline politics, no
So
threat.
I
Um,
I read all the responses that I could find. I mean, again, like maybe there were some that I missed. And again, I like I'm just my mind is boggled that I don't know. Do the police have to look for some evidence when someone calls in and says, "Hey, this man is harassing me"? Because these are
Exactly.
comments on, again, I looked in, I think I
Any been
grabbed the
have any
representative
been
sample.
deleted?
Like,
Sorry,
well, no, like,
have any of these been deleted? So okay, everything you left everything up.
I haven't deleted
Okay,
anything.
sorry.
but like I'm looking at, she'll post a tweet. It'll get like, I don't know, 100,000 engagements. It'll get a couple hundred, a thousand retweets, a couple hundred comments, and one of them in there is Eve saying, whatever, I disagree. Nothing even like particularly profane or vile or anything else. And I imagine Eve, as someone who posts a lot politically, who is also hardline in your views, that you probably get people in your replies saying, "Fuck you, Eve, that's stupid," or you're defending
Oh,
terrorists or whatever. I mean,
kill you. I get all kinds of death threats. I get all kinds of kill you. I mean, not individuals' names, but all kinds of people. The pager jokes. I mean, endless stream of that. I should point out this. Okay, so Dahlia goes to the police in the summer. Okay, so on July 5th, she tweets something that I had posted in response to her from 6 or 7 days before that, and she puts a declaration saying, Yves Engler, this is harassment.
yeah,
Stop now. I'm feeling harassed. This is the last warning. This is your only and last warning.
yeah.
I respond to that in exact, I just kind of rewrite her thing with my thing. Okay, people can check that out. But so I at that point knew that she was trying to set the terrain for some sort of like policing legal kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
And so she goes to the police. The police open an investigation. They close that investigation, decide there isn't enough evidence to pursue charges. Then this Conservative Party candidate, who's this lawyer, Neil Oberman, he's been the main lawyer in sort of lawfare, Zionist lawfare campaigning in
Mm,
Montreal. He's the one who brought an injunction against the student encampment in April at
Mm.
Yale University. He then gets involved, writes a letter on December 18th, I believe is the date they mentioned at the Crown in the court. And then they open the investigation back up.
mhm.
And 2 months later, I don't know if it was only Neil Oberman that sends this. Like, we know that's proof. That's proof. Maybe there's other, pressure brought in some different way. I don't know. But yes, they then bring it forward. So initially, the Montreal police decided there wasn't
Mhm.
evidence to warrant charges, and then they went back on
They
that.
took a second whack at the pinata. Two legal questions. In Quebec, do you have the presumption of innocence like we have here in the United States? And then second question is, how long can they keep you in custody without formally indicting you? In the United States, the rule of thumb is roughly 24 hours, although
Mm.
if you run into a holiday weekend or whatever, that can go
Which
longer.
which they do on purpose. They'll arrest you on a Thursday, knowing that they don't have arraignments on Friday. So you're in Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, and then Monday morning they let you go and say, "Oh, no hard feelings."
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely, yeah, there's a presumption of innocence. I don't know the rules around the sort of time frame and that. I know in my case, I had a video hearing from the detention center downtown
Jeez.
like 5 hours later, where the Crown has the right. The Crown objected to my release. The Crown should, I mean, in any modestly just scenario, they would have accepted my release, and I think, with the conditions I was willing to agree to, which was no communication with the two individuals. Um, and then I had another video hearing from then they bring you to you have to send you to the prison, I guess within 24 hours, so they get sent to the prison. And they have another video hearing, and they don't let me talk to my lawyer before. And this is another
Oh
part of
my
the
God.
breakthrough. I wasn't able to talk to my lawyer at all. So until the Monday, even though the judge on the Friday was mandated that the prison make sure that I'm allowed to talk to my lawyer. The prison guards and the system didn't allow for that. Um, but the I don't know what the rules are of like the time frame before they have to appear before a judge, or you have to the process begins. I don't know those rules.
But you were stewing for 5 days. What can you describe the conditions? Were you kept in solitary? Were you in a holding cell with other people? Was it dirty? Was it clean? Did you get fed?
Yeah, it was a minimum wing of this Bordeaux prison, which is about 40 minutes outside of downtown, and it there was about bunk beds for about 30, and maybe 17 or 18 at the high point, and seven or eight of us at the low point. Uh, and then on the other side was like a eating area that you had access to much of the day, but they kind of locked down every so often. That had a TV. I got lucky right away on the Thursday night when around 9 or 10, there was a pencil on a table. And at this point, I didn't know how lucky I got. I got access to this pencil and a couple pieces of paper, and I was able to write kind of much of the time over the next 4 days. One of the other prisoners tried to take the pencil from me at one point, and a guard sort of tried to take the pencil from me at one point. Um, and it was hard to get paper. I had to like rip up a plastic or a brown paper bag to write on and stuff like that. The food wasn't very good, but it wasn't terrible. There were like three kind of like low level fights that broke out. Mainly, what it was is, well, there's a couple of people. There was one guy in there that he shit himself. He was an older guy. He couldn't control his body.
Mm.
At one point, he put his diaper on over top of his pants.
Oh dear.
Somebody who absolutely, I don't know what he was accused of, but there's no reason in the world this guy should have been in there, right?
Mm.
Like he needed help in every sense of the word, like, physical care to obviously, mental care. Then there was a number of guys that were in there that were, abused their partners. And listening to these people, it's one guy in specific, he's somebody who, my conclusion was somebody who had been very abused and was abusing others,
Mm.
right? And it was. I mean, the people who I didn't feel threatened. I'm a fairly, I played junior hockey, and I'm a fairly a big guy, even though I'm a fair bit older now. And the people everyone was nice to me. They kind of, I think, viewed me as a bit of an odd character and in the context and stuff like that. But
You mean it wasn't the cell wasn't the facility wasn't full of people who'd written angry rebuttals to Zionist tweets?
no, that wasn't the most common. The guards were, it's a very dehumanizing. The guards are really, and I think the guards themselves are dehumanized by how much they dehumanize all the
Mm.
prisoners. But yeah, I didn't personally. I think actually most of the people I was in there with were more traumatized by the experience than I was. It's not. Yeah, it just wasn't that difficult for me. I mean, obviously it's boring, and there's moments where on the Friday when I thought I was having my bail hearing, and they push it all off to Monday, and you question, I'm going to be in jail for 3 more days, and I don't at this point you don't even know if you're going to defeat the condition, right? Like ultimately we won they removed the condition, but you don't know, and you question yourself whether it was a good judgment to just to fight this out and stuff like
When you
that.
say that, you mean does that mean they dropped the case? I mean, are you now
No, no, no. So all
okay?
like by Monday afternoon, it was all about just the bail hearing, and it was the now what happens is the judge asks the Crown to make the argument for the condition of stopping you from effectively talking about the case,
Mm,
and we don't even have to provide a defense because as the Crown's making the case, the judge wraps their head around the fact that you're like basically this is a total infringement of freedom of expression.
Mhm.
The room is full of supporters. There's a spillover room, so I think the judge understands there's this important Palestine component to what's going on, and the judge basically forces the Crown to um, uh, agree to the conditions that we were willing to agree to before the whole process began,
Mhm.
and
So you harassed the judge into submission with your supporters. I mean, I want to ask, like, what chances would you give an effort by yourself to bring harassment charges against somebody in your mentions, saying, maybe repeating something like, just wait, Eve, the IDF is coming for you, or whatever, right? Like, I want to talk about the political aspect of this speech, because it is incredible to me that, I mean, as you say, the police initially they decided there wasn't any merit to these charges. Then you had what appears to be a politically motivated lawyer get involved and decide, oh no, we really want to go after this guy. Like, do you think that you would be successful in charging someone with harassment who, a Zionist who's in your mentions, saying you're wrong and using spicy language occasionally?
I think there's almost no chance of that. Part of the backdrop, of course, is all these kind of stories saying there's all this anti-Semitism. Jewish Montrealers, Jewish Canadians are under threat. That's part of the backdrop to which the police investigator move forward with stuff. So, conversely, there's not a big rhetoric out there of the fact that the left wing activists are being persecuted. Not certainly not in the dominant media. So no, I think there's almost no chance of that. And as I said, to take it more in that political direction, Canada has the War Crimes and Crimes Against Humanity Act,
Mhm.
and there's all these Canadians who've been fighting in the Israeli military. The police should be investigating rather than going after me for some posts on X. They should be investigating these individuals if they may have been involved in any war crimes in Gaza. There's a Foreign Enlistment Act that says that organizations and individuals in this country can't induce Canadians to join another country's military. Well, we know there are a bunch of individuals and organizations that have been doing that. The Canada Revenue Agency's rules around charities, you're not allowed to support other countries' militaries. Well, we know there's a bunch of charities supporting the Israeli military. So if you start thinking about how policing resources are being devoted in this kind of context, you realize that in a just world they'd be devoted in very different ways than they are.
I want to ask also, or just put it in a context, right? Because you're not the only person that something like this has happened to. I do think you're the only person who spent this much time in jail. But I have read that you have a hearing in April still, so it's not like this case has been dropped. I will cross my fingers. It is hard to believe that any kind of case could actually like in good faith be brought against you, right? I have every confidence that these charges will be dropped. But a journalist who we all know, Max Blumenthal, was recently stopped at an airport here in DC on his way back home from being overseas, pulled into a room and shown a list of names. Repeatedly told, oh, you're not the target of any investigation, it's fine, but do you know anybody on this list? And one of those names happened to be the given name of Code Pink director Medea Benjamin, who we all know is a prominent anti-war activist and pro-Palestinian activist. And, you know, I think that I would be very surprised if anyone involved in efforts like these genuinely believes that you personally, Eve, are a threat to another individual, or that Max Blumenthal is a threat to an individual person, right? And so, you know, I guess I'm asking, what is the actual intent of this? Because it's not to keep Dahlia Kurtz safe. You were not going to go to Toronto and harass her. So what's the point?
Well, I did on February 13th, I did with a lawyer from the BC Civil Liberties Association, did a panel on the new McCarthyism in Canada and basically the targeting of anti-genocide protesters. And we just went through a whole bunch of examples that are in the public domain of activists being targeted. So this is the context. This one example, the Indigo 11 of they got their houses raided. 11 of these people in the Toronto area alleged to have been involved in putting a poster on the bookstore, the biggest bookstore company in Canada, whose owner assists non-Israelis joining the Israeli military. And they raided the houses. There'd be like 12 police officers like went in at 6 a.m. because like they're alleged. I can't imagine all of them even, you know, probably two people who put up the posters. But anyways, so they're alleged to have gone in or have put up posters and they're getting the houses raided. The most egregious example of the abuse of state authority against Palestine solidarity is the listing, which happened 3 months ago, of the Samidoun Palestinian Political Prisoners Network grassroots group in Vancouver, and they were listed as a terrorist organization. Its director, Charlotte Cates, she had her house raided. Got raided once, and she got basically taken off a bus by the police in Vancouver. And I talked to some activists about a month, 6 weeks ago in Vancouver. There all these people, the Vancouver police are trying to basically associate all different people with this Samidoun group that's now been put on the terrorist list in Canada and actually in the US as well. And so it's basically become a banned organization. So the political intent in all this is obviously targeting those that are challenging Canada's complicity in Israel's apartheid and genocide. And it's not a new thing that the state targets those challenging power. There's a part of it that is a positive in that they're doing it in part because there is a lot of activism on this issue. There's never been in the history of Canadian foreign policy a example where there's been more solidarity, more campaigning against Canada's complicity in international crimes than there has been over the past 16 months. So it's in part a reaction to that. And obviously it needs to be resisted. But yeah, it's a way of trying to weakening a movement challenging the dominant ethos in Canadian politics.
Yeah, and the Canadian state, you know, potentially violating its own laws in support of a foreign country, right? You know, potentially violating your freedom of expression. You know, allowing elements representing the state to engage in lawfare, again, not to the benefit of any Canadian, but to the benefit of Israel, which, you know, wants to uphold its. I don't know who has this idea that Israel is like a morally legitimate entity anymore, but yeah, to benefit a foreign entity rather than the rights of Canadians at home.
Wow. Sure.
So what next?
Well, next I have a court case on this in 2 months, but what next is you know, we need to keep challenging Canada's complicity in Israel's crimes and not be deterred. You know, I think this was a failure on the standpoint of the you know, the lawyer and Dahlia Kurtz. I think that they made a tactical error in this case. But I should say that, you know, they're doubling down and a senator.
Yeah, how so? I mean, how's the mistake? I mean, they got you tied up with the guy with the diaper for 5 days. I mean, what mistake do you think they've made?
Well, I think there was an outpouring of support. Tons of people donated, tons of people. I mean, my Twitter following goes up, and all the social media goes up, and there's a sort of, they get shown as being authoritarians. So I think if the Palestine cause and freedom of expression become viewed as, together, that broadens our movement a bit. And in that sense, I think it's, if pro-Israelism is authoritarianism, that I think in the medium and long term is damaging to pro-Israel.
If you're convicted, what's the maximum penalty?
I don't think that I would even if I'm convicted, I don't think I'd even get 5 days in jail for being convicted, right?
What would happen?
I don't know. I don't know I think the potential is many, probably a couple years in jail or whatever. But I think that's so outlandish that there's no chance of that happening.
And you would appeal, of course.
And I would appeal and stuff like that. But my lawyer's suggestion was that if you got convicted, you'd probably get some probation. That would be the usual in this.
It would be an outrage. Yves, thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us again. It's good to talk to you again. Good to see your face because we never used to do it on video before.
Thanks for having
Good luck.
Thanks
Such a pleasure.
And I know Yves written about this on his Substack or his website. It's Yves Engler. That's with a YVES. And you're Engler Yves on Twitter for anyone who wants to go and find out more. Thanks a lot, Yves.
Thank you. Thanks. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you. That's a chilling story.
Honestly, I mean, it's unbelievable that he sat in there for 5 days just because they wanted to not allow him to write about it.
Forgive me for getting on a soapbox, but I'm sorry to interrupt you. You have to ask, is Canadian society safer with him in prison? Right? Is society better off with him in prison?
Yeah.
Is Canada a freer place by restricting free speech, especially nonviolent free speech in support of human rights? This is above and beyond. To me, I mean, I know what it's like to be facing criminal charges, whether they're minor or major, but to me, this is something that could be a cause célèbre.
And the idea that
disgusting.
It's harassment.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
exactly.
That then he's harassing the police officer by people. Are we harassing the United States? Are we harassing members of Congress when we call them to tell them our opinions on things? I mean, that's, again, just, you're not allowed to defend yourself.
Do you think it sort of exploits the Canadian cultural cliche of, we're very polite, we're nice people, we don't bother other people.
Right.
I think
Canada has gone the way of the UK. It's a surveillance state. It's a police state. This is not good.
Because Canada's also pretty selective about who they're actually nice to.
Yeah.
When you get right down to it,
they are selective. I'm not one of the special. I'm not one of the special chosen ones.
Yeah. There's a lot of people in history that Canada's not been very nice to.
True. You could say that again.
I know we have to let John go in a second, but by request, a friend wanted to know what we make of Donald Trump. Apparently, I can't see that he has done it yet. He is supposed to do it today, Friday.
He did it.
Oh, it's done. Thank God. Yeah. English is the official language of the United States, I guess.
It's one thing to say, oh, well, everybody speaks English anyway. Let's make it the official language of the United States. Mm-hmm. It's the de facto language of the United States. But there's going to be real fallout from a decision like this.
That's true.
For example, you vote in a multicultural state like California, where the state of California provides translators for something like 60 or 65 different languages if you're going through court, for example. Well, if English is the official language, tough luck for you if you don't speak English. It's going to be harder to get a translator in official settings like court hearings. You're not going to be able to get ballots printed in Spanish or Vietnamese or Chinese or whatever the language happens to be when you're an American citizen. There are going to be real and documentable changes associated with this. This is a very bad idea. This is one of the things that that I was always proud of, that English was not the official language. It was the de facto language, the lingua franca. And I believe that everybody should learn how to speak English, just like my grandparents did. During the New Deal, they had to go through English language classes. But we should also be preserving these foreign languages. It makes us a richer country.
Yeah.
Couldn't
And you
agree more.
still do have to go through language. I mean, so here is what the Wall Street Journal has to say about this executive order, that it rescinds a mandate that was issued by former President Bill Clinton, that agencies and recipients of federal funding were required to provide language assistance to people who didn't speak English or didn't speak it well, but they still can provide documents and services.
They're not going to get funding for it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, forms, right? A lot of people,
Yeah.
they're going to have trouble filling out applications for,
Yep.
you name it, right? I mean,
it's just like, do you believe, for example, court documents? Do you believe in this country? Do you believe in the principle that you have a right to defend yourself? You have a right to a fair trial. You have a right to all of these things, because the way that you enact that belief is by making it accessible to people in this country, regardless of language. Or do you just want to make it harder? It's like, it's like when you make a bunch of rules for people to be able to access Medicaid or food stamps or whatever else. None of that is going to make people less needy. It's just going to make it harder to get on the program. It doesn't solve any problem.
I mean, there's a lot of advantages to people who, for example, are native-born, English-speaking only citizens to have other people who are not like them be part of the mix, right? And be able to communicate freely. I mean, it's analogous to me to the to the states that started issuing driver's licenses to undocumented workers. And my first thought was, that's outlandish. If I move to Azerbaijan as a non-Azeri citizen, I don't think I can get an Azerbaijani driver's license. But then, I had one too many car accidents where I was not at fault with an undocumented person who could not get insurance. Okay. So they're here, they got to drive. And then when they started issuing these licenses, it's not like they stayed off the grid. They want insurance. So they got insurance. And now the odds are, if you're hit by an undocumented worker, that person's got an insurance company that can, make it right for you. That's good for me as someone who's born in Massachusetts. So, I mean, I know it's just like isolating people is a mistake. It's sort of you don't want immigrants to be afraid to call the fire department or the police if they see something that you want them to say something. You want them to be able to, let's say, go to the police station and file a report and maybe fill that report out in Spanish because, because
it helps you get a criminal off the streets.
Yeah. Right.
And God forbid they try to fucking tell me that this is going to save money. It's going to save money on forms, right? It's going to save money on a couple of translators or whatever. A lot more. It will. I mean, it's just stupid. It's just, again, it seems.
Will this have implications for state and local government, or is it just for in the federal system? I would imagine, right?
Yeah, because apparently a bunch of states already have English designated as their official state language. Which is, whatever. I mean, obviously, English is the primary language in the United States. It's beneficial if you eventually learn it when you move here. I do know from personal experience, people move to countries where they do not speak the language and spend years of time there. English is my second language,
actually.
My grandfather never learned to speak English. My dad's father learned a little bit. My mom's father never learned English. He worked with a bunch of Greeks at Republic Steel in Warren, Ohio. He hung out with Greeks at a Greek coffee shop. He went to the Greek Orthodox Church on Sundays. All of his friends, all of his relatives were Greek. He never needed to learn how to speak English.
I mean, I say I have more respect. I think you should try. I have more respect for people who do try. But it is just a thing that happens. And also, some people are not that great at languages.
Yeah.
It's fine.
It's better for you. You should do it.
Sure.
That's my advice to you. But it shouldn't be required by law.
And I mean, I say that if you're someone from Honduras who moves to the United States, or someone from the United States who moves to Thailand, or Japan or whatever, try to learn the language of the place that you're in if you want to be a part of it. But so this is just more. I mean, it will have real world repercussions, as you said, Ted. And it's also also a lot of dumb symbolism.
Yeah,
You know,
it's the doggiest of dog whistles.
yes, yes. So, hurrah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe one of these days we'll get to all those stories that we wanted to talk
You know what
about
I
at the
worry
beginning of
about
the week.
is if we ever see another Democrat or a liberal as president, mark my words, these things will not be rescinded.
You're
Huh.
absolutely right, Ted. 100% right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because they'll be afraid of being like, oh, look, he's woke.
Yeah.
He's pro-migrant. I
Yeah.
don't want to appear weak. I don't want to appear liberal.
100%.
Yeah.
That's why we still have Space Force.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we
Exactly.
just have to wait for the entire system to be dismantled and reformed, and then there won't be any need to repeal it. It won't exist anymore. It'll be an obsolete government.
Yeah, it's increasingly feeling like that.
I mean, that's the one thing I think, other than the occasional sort of refreshing foreign policy moment, even though, I did not relish Zelensky getting scolded. I think you just have to hope that Trump does hasten that process, at least by showing how much.
It's rough to watch a man get gelded on international television.
Oh, God.
I mean, that's
honestly,
what it was.
It was bad.
There's a non-zero chance that something far worse happens to Zelensky on film at some point.
By the way, right-wing social media, while we were talking, has been going crazy saying, Zelensky's done. Who's going to replace him?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, they're probably not wrong.
Yeah.
And if either way, you know what I mean? Like he can't, what is going to happen without the United States? And Europe can't supply them with what they need to keep fighting, to keep them from being mutiny.
No.
Probably eventually, Yeah.
No. Nor should they.
Right.
It's a lost cause.
It is.
Trump is right.
Everyone
Everyone needs to come to the negotiation table.
Mm-hmm.
Putin's willing. I mean, let's do it.
It's just sad. It will be perceived as a Ukrainian lost cause when really it was an American lost cause.
Yes, it was.
To damage and isolate Russia,
That's
to
Ukrainians could have said no.
Yeah, it's backfired on us.
We're the devil.
And we just never, we seem to always be able to dodge we're never actually the loser, right? We're very good at making other people take falls for us.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah. Someone read Do Time Like a Spy.
Yeah.
And they get other people to do your dirty work for you.
Skills you never realized you had.
So useful, I gotta say. All right, I think we got to let John go.
Well, thank you.
Maybe we'll resume deprogramming next week and as I said, get to all the news that we didn't get to talk about, like Macron visiting, Keir Starmer visiting, all kinds of other stuff.
And who knows what'll happen between now and next week.
Yeah. All right, that's the deprogramming we have for now, though.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.